Hey everyone, it's Peter here. Peter Dinklage. You know me from the screen, maybe as Tyrion Lannister scheming my way through Westeros, or from those indie films where I poured my soul into characters that felt like extensions of myself. But today, I'm not here as an actor. I'm here as just me, a guy who's carried this story around like a stone in my pocket for decades, turning it over in my hands when no one's looking. I've never shared it publicly before. Not in interviews, not on stages, not even with some of my closest friends. It's too raw, too personal. But lately, I've been thinking about how the things that nearly break us can end up defining us in ways we never expect. So, pull up a chair. This is the story of the day I was told I'd never make it. The day someone looked me in the eye and said my dream was impossible because of who I am, because of this body I was born into. It was the fall of 1991. I was 22 years old, fresh out of Bennington College, where I'd studied drama and thrown myself into every play I could. Bennington was this liberal arts haven in Vermont, all rolling hills and eccentric professors who encouraged you to break rules and find your voice. For the first time, I felt like my height, my achondroplasia, this genetic thing that made me 4 or 5 in a world built for giants, didn't define every interaction. In class, we were all just artists, experimenting, failing spectacularly, and getting back up. I played roles that had nothing to do with being a dwarf. I was Puck in A Midsummer Night's Dream, channeling this mischievous energy that felt electric. I directed scenes, wrote bits of dialogue that poured out of me like they'd been waiting my whole life. It was intoxicating. For those 4 years, I believed, really believed, that talent could trump everything else. But college ends, doesn't it? Reality crashes in. I moved to New York City with a backpack, a few $100 from odd jobs, and this burning conviction that I was going to be an actor. Not just any actor, a serious one. I didn't want to be the punchline, the elf in a holiday special, or the quirky sidekick whose only purpose was to make the tall leads look heroic. No! I wanted raw depth with humanity. Characters who laughed, cried, loved, schemed just like anyone else. So I hit the pavement, pound the sidewalks of Manhattan, that concrete jungle where dragons go to either bloom or get stomped underfoot. My first real audition was for an off-Broadway play, some experimental piece about urban isolation, set in a dingy apartment. The role was for a disillusioned writer, nothing specified about height in the breakdown. I thought, perfect, this is my shot. I prepared for days, memorizing lines until they echoed in my sleep, practicing in front of a cracked mirror in my shoebox apartment in the East Village. The place had no heat. Literally, the radiator was a relic from the Stone Age, and I'd huddle under blankets, running scenes, imagining the applause. I was nervous, sure, but excited. This was it, the beginning. The audition room was in this rundown theater on 42nd Street, the kind with peeling paint and the faint smell of old coffee and desperation. I walked in, heart pounding like a drum in my chest. There were 3 people behind a folding table, the director, a producer, and the casting director, a woman in her 40s, sharp features, clipboard in hand, looking like she'd seen 1,000 hopefuls like me and sent most of them packing. I introduced myself, voice steady despite the butterflies. Peter Dinklage, reading for the role of the writer. She glanced up from her notes, and I saw it, the flicker. That momentary pause where her eyes registered my height and something shifted, but she nodded. Professional. Go ahead, Peter. Whenever you're ready, I love. It was a piece about loneliness in the city, how the crowds make you feel more isolated than ever. I poured everything into it, my voice rising and falling, gestures sharp but contained, drawing from that well of emotion I tapped in college. I felt good, alive. When I finished, there was silence. The director scribbled something. The producer nodded vaguely, but the casting director leaned forward, her expression a mix of pity and bluntness. Peter, she said, setting down her pen. That was interesting. You got presence, I'll give you that. But let's be real here. Acting, real acting, the kind that pays bills and gets you noticed. It's a visual medium. Audiences have expectations. Directors have visions. And someone like you. She gestured vaguely at me, as if my entire being was self-explanatory. With your condition, it's going to be impossible. No one's going to cast you in serious roles. You'll be typecast forever. The dwarf, the oddity, the comic relief. If you're lucky, you'll get gigs in fantasy stuff, playing gnomes or whatever. The leading parts, drama, forget it. You'll be better off finding something else. Teaching, maybe, or writing. Save yourself the heartbreak. Her words hit like a gut punch. I stood there, frozen, the air sucked out of the room. Humiliation washed over me first, hot, prickly, making my face burn. Who was she to dismiss me like that? To reduce me to my height, as if everything else, the training, the passion, the raw talent I'd honed, meant nothing. Then came the anger, bubbling up from deep inside, a rage I felt flickers of growing up, when kids stared or whispered, but never this pointed, this professional. I wanted to snap back, to tell her she was wrong, that she didn't know me. But doubt crept in, quiet and insidious, whispering, what if she's right? What if this is all there is? I mumbled something like, thanks for your time, and walked out, legs heavy, the city noise a blow. I remember stumbling into a nearby diner, ordering a coffee I couldn't afford, and just sitting there, staring at the steam rising from the cup. The humiliation lingered, replaying her words on loop. It felt like she'd stripped me bare, exposed every insecurity I'd buried. Growing up in Morristown, New Jersey, I'd learned to armor myself against the stares, the comments. My parents, wonderful, supportive people, never treated me differently. My dad was an insurance salesman, mom a music teacher. They encouraged me to pursue theater from a young age. But the world outside, it was cruel. Kids at school called me names. Teachers sometimes patronized me. I channeled that into puppet shows in my basement, creating worlds where I controlled the narrative. But now, in the real world, chasing the dream, it all came crashing back. That night, back in my freezing apartment, the doubt took hold. I lay on my lumpy mattress, staring at the water-stained ceiling, questioning everything. Was I delusional? Had Bennington been a bubble, shielding me from the truth? Inner conflict raged. Part of me wanted to pack up and go home, find a steady job, something safe. Data processing, maybe. I'd heard it paid okay. No judgments there. But another part, deeper, rebelled. No, you felt the magic on stage. You know what you're capable of. I thought about philosophers I'd read in college. Nietzsche, with his idea of the Übermensch, overcoming obstacles to become something greater. Or Camus, and the absurd life throws meaninglessness at you, but you rebel by creating your own purpose. In that element, alone in the dark, I realized acting wasn't just a job, it was my rebellion against a world that tried to limit me. The days after were a blur of pain. I didn't audition for weeks. Instead, I took temp jobs, filing papers, answering phones to pay rent. Each one felt like a surrender, a step away from the dream. I'd come home exhausted, collapse, and replay that audition. The anger faded into a simmer, but the doubt, it gnawed. I confided in a friend from college over cheap beer in a dive bar. Maybe she's right. Maybe I'm fighting a losing battle. He listened, then shook his head. Peter, that's bullshit. You got fire. Use it. His words stuck, but they didn't erase the hurt. Reflection came slowly, like dawn creeping over the skyline. I started journaling, pouring out thoughts on yellow legal pads. One entry stands out. If my height is the obstacle, then let it be the story, not the punchline like a heart. I recall the class at Bennington where we studied Brecht's alienation effect, making the audience see the familiar in new ways. Maybe my presence could do that, force people to confront their biases. Philosophically, it hit me. Art isn't about fitting in, it's about disrupting. Shakespeare wrote flawed heroes, Hamlet with his indecision, Lear with his pride. Why couldn't I play them? My flaw was just another layer. But reflection alone doesn't pay bills. The journey turned painful. Years of rejection followed, not always as blunt as that first one, but insidious. Auditions where directors smiled politely, but never called back. Agents who said, "We love your tape, but the role's not right." I knew what they meant. I refused the stereotypical gigs that came my way. Leprechaun in a commercial, elf in a holiday play. No, I'd say, echoing that power I later talked about. It was hard, especially when the fridge was empty and I'd subsist on ramen and willpower. I joined a punk-funk rap band called Wizzy. Yeah, you heard that right, to blow off steam, screaming lyrics into mighty set underground gigs. It was cathartic, but not the dream. Defiance built gradually. Around 1995, I landed a small role in an indie film, Living in Oblivion. It was tiny, but regal. No stereotypes. Tom DiCillo directed, and he saw me as an actor, not a novelty. That fueled me. I told myself, if one person sees it, others will. I hustled off Broadway plays, experimental theater. One night, after a grueling rehearsal, I sat on a fire escape, city lights twinkling below, and vowed, I'll prove her wrong. Not for revenge, but for me. Inner conflict persisted, nights of doubt, wondering if I was stubborn or stupid. But defiance won. I read Sartre. Existence precedes essence. I wasn't defined by my body. I defined myself through actions. The triumphs came slow, then in waves. 2003, The Station Agent. Finbar McBride, a man retreating from the world because of stares and judgments. It mirrored my life. Tom McCarthy wrote it for me after seeing me in a play. Sundance loved it, critics raved. Suddenly, I was making it, but the real triumph, refusing to compromise. Then, Game of Thrones in 2011. Tyrion witty, complex, a dwarf who's the smartest in the room. Emmys, Golden Globes. But more than awards, it was validation. Audiences saw the humanity. Looking back, that casting director's words, they were meant to break me, but they became fuel. In quiet moments, I think of her, not with anger, but gratitude, right? Without that devastation, maybe I'd have settled. Instead, it sparked reflection, defiance, triumph, full circle. Now, I tell stories that challenge perceptions. To anyone listening, words meant to break you. They don't define you. Your response does. Thank you for hearing my life out the night.